To follow a 2019 Lenawee County murder case. Two men are expected to go on trial more than 4 years later. Amanda Fay talks with the victim's mother about the stress of these last few years in a story you'll only see on WTOL 11.
Anybody that knew Chris knew what a happy soul Chris was. He was the singer, he was the dancer, he was the, always, cracking jokes.
Those memories are all Christina Dickerson has had to hold on to her son Chris the past 4 years.
Justice for Chris! Justice for Chris!
Chris was killed in January of 2019, right before he was set to testify against Andrew Cecil, who was accused of stabbing Chris just months before. And now Cecil is a co-defendant in Chris's murder trial set to begin in early April, after years of delays in the case.
It's just been so stressful.
Cecil is facing murder and gang-related charges, alongside Count TERESO the Almighty Trevino, previously known as Terry Trevino. Tracina just hopes the trial actually happens.
I just don't know how I'm gonna keep it together. I can't have another letdown.
2 other men have been charged in the case, one pleading down to lesser charges, and are expected to testify against the co-defendants. Tracina feels many more people are involved in her son's death, but she says if a jury finds Cecil and Trevino guilty, she may find some closure.
I don't know what that feels like yet. I hope that it closes that door to where I can move on. Because I just been stuck.
Reporting in Adrian, Michigan, Amanda Fay, WTOL 11.
We did reach out to the defendant's attorneys. One did not get back to us, but the other says his team is prepared for trial in April. He says while his client was previously a gang member, he was not at the time of Dickerson's murder and maintains he had nothing to do with his death.
So that trial happened, and we don't have access to it, but what we are going to review now is the sentencing for that trial. He was found guilty by a jury, and we're going to listen to his mother's victim impact statement and then the judge's comments. And then after that, we're going to review the details of this case with the documents that we have. So with that, let's jump in.
Good morning, Ms. Dickerson. If you just state your full name and then you can say whatever it is you'd like to say.
Tracina Dickerson. Before I start, I would like to thank all the ones that have helped in getting justice for my son, which include, but not limited to, Detective Sharp, Detective Greca, Detective Ruffner, Detective Ward, and others. Prosecutors Jackie Weiss and Doug Hartog, and the victim rights advocates Rebecca Roller and Rochelle Petty. They have all spent thousands of hours on Chris's case. Your Honor, it has not been easy on any of them to deal with me. Times I didn't even want to deal with myself, but they never gave up on me, even if I had given up on myself. Thank you all. Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to speak today. I honestly don't even know where to begin. First of all, it has been 1,606 days since Chris was murdered. Your Honor, not a single day goes by that I don't miss my son immensely. Most nights I find myself crying myself to sleep. That's if I sleep at all. These past 4.5 years have been excruciating, to say the least. Everyone tells me all the time, I don't know how you do it. There's only one answer to that. And that is, I wasn't given a choice. I would like to take a little time today to tell you about the Chris I knew. My son was born January 27, 1992. I think from the time he could walk, he was carrying a football. Chris loved football. He played football all the way throughout his whole school years. Chris made one of his biggest dreams come true when he was able to play in the state championship game on Ford Field. Another one of Chris's passions was singing. He would sing for hours, whether he was in the bathroom, in his room, or in the car. He would say, Mom, after I win American Idol, I'm going to buy you your dream home. Chris had the most beautiful smile. Chris could not stand for anyone to be mad at him. He would not stop until he made things right. He loved to pick on his younger brother, Jacob. He also loved sitting and watching football with his brothers. Chris and his brothers were as close as you can get. They had a brotherly love and bond like no other. You see, Your Honor, this is the son I knew and lost. When these monsters planned and murdered my son, they didn't just murder my son, they also murdered the life that I once lived. My new life is filled with what ifs, regrets, and the guilt is almost unbearable. Your Honor, my son sacrificed his life to protect me and his brothers from these monsters. Chris left my home because he feared they would track him down and that we would be hurt also. If Chris would have just stayed at home, I could have protected him somehow. Because that's what a mother does, protect her children. When Chris left the house, he was out there all alone with no support, no safe place to go. I just wanted him to come home. Your Honor, my son lost his life in a dark, freezing, wooded area. When these monsters would talk about Chris after they murdered him, they referred to him as Frosty the Snowman. I can still feel how brutally cold it was back then. We had record-setting lows of negative 40-degree wind chill. I remember praying that my son was not out there somewhere hurt, there in that freezing cold when he was missing. They found my son His body was frozen solid. It took 3 days to thaw his body so they could do an autopsy. Because of what they done to my son and leaving him out there in the woods, I was not able to see my son and tell him goodbye. Your Honor, I had to say goodbye to a casket. Chris had 2 children that he loved and worshiped. They will never know how much their dad loved them. My granddaughter will never get to experience a daddy-daughter dance with her dad. On that special day, her dad will not be there to walk her down the aisle. My grandson will never get to have his dad there to teach him everything about football or any of life's lessons. Your Honor, when my grandchildren visit their dad, they have to go to the cemetery to visit him. Chris has 3 brothers. My 4 boys were always together, either at my house, their house, football games, cookouts, you name it, they were together. Now, instead of picking up the phone to call him or come by just to hang out, now they have to go to the cemetery to talk or just hang out with Chris. Christmas was Chris's favorite holiday. He loved decorating the tree, and the boys and I would always bake cookies and decorate them. I can still hear Chris telling everyone, "Look, mine's the best." With that beautiful smile on his face. Yes, even after they were adults, this was our favorite tradition. Now I get a memorial tree every year for my son down at the Riverwalk. That is the only thing I have done for Christmas since 2019. I no longer put a tree up at home. And I have not baked or decorated cookies. You see, Your Honor, another tradition that was stolen from my family. They didn't just take a life, they took the life of someone who was loved dearly by so many. And in return, he loved so many. And Your Honor, I want to make this very clear. I cannot be that mother who stands up here and says, "I forgive this person," because that would be a lie. I hate this person with every ounce of my being. Will that kill me someday? Probably. But you see, Your Honor, the life I wanted to live ended January 22nd, 2018. Your Honor, right after they had found Chris, there was a post about Chris on Facebook. And this person sitting here commented on it saying, "Chris Dickerson rots." Your Honor, that is how cold-blooded this person is. He did not only destroy my family, but he has destroyed his own family. There's only one big difference. His family can still talk to him, see him, even touch him. I do hope and pray this person never has to feel the unbearable pain that I am forced to live with the rest of my life, because I would not wish this on my worst enemy. When you have a child, you can never imagine a day without them, until someone who thinks they are God Almighty comes along and shows you. I do hope and pray that my son finds a way to hug this monster every day of the rest of his life, and that he will never have a second of peace He made that choice for himself. When I think of Chris now, I can't help but think of him as a hero. Who knows how many mothers out there that Chris saved from having to go through what I have had to go through, thanks to him losing his life to these monsters. Your Honor, it does not matter how many years you sentence him to, it will never be enough. But I am begging you to sentence him to the maximum sentence that is allowed. Show him the same dignity and respect that he showed my son. Also, Your Honor, if you decide to order restitution, it would be greatly appreciated. I would also like you to know that it was brought to my attention through a screenshot of a post that this person's wife had posted. It read, "Almost there. Only $200 more and I will be able to get him right." My goal was $1,000 to make sure that he would be able to purchase all his personal needs for his devastating sentence. Because once my husband is entered into the MDOC, they will take half of his money for restitution. The only time that I can get him a decent amount of money in to cover him without them taking restitution is when he goes into the prison. You see, Your Honor, he is still manipulating the system and still victimizing me by trying to make sure I do not get any restitution. It just sickens me that he will be able to go into prison, order a TV, radio, food, all the things. If you were to order restitution, I probably will never see a penny of it. Your Honor, I miss my son so much. Thank you, and everyone who has helped get justice for my son, Christopher James Dickerson. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson.
Your Honor, the court has a copy of Mr. Trevino's, prior record, and we see the numerous shootings and he was charged with and involved in and witness intimidation. And it's for those reasons that his guidelines on the murder too fall between 365 to 1,200 months, Your Honor. I can't tell you the number of times that our office has been faced with witnesses who are terrified to come forward, witnesses who are terrified to give a statement not only to the police, but to come to court and testify. Can't tell the court how many times I've been asked, how can I be assured that I won't be the next Chris Dickerson? I'm asking this court, and I submitted a letter requesting consecutive sentencing on count 4 on top of counts 1, 2, and 3. And I did that because I do want this court to send a message that we are not okay with preventing witnesses from telling police officers what happened, from telling judges, courts, and juries what happened. This court sat through a jury trial. We had jurors that were terrified to walk through the parking lot to their car for fear of retaliation. Mr. Dickerson was taken from his family, his friends, and I do believe the whole community felt that. And for those reasons, Your Honor, I'm asking you to sentence Mr. Trevino on the higher end of the guidelines. And I'm also asking the court to make count 4, the gang crime, consecutive to 1, 2, and 3. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay.
I'd like to be able to think that what we do here today makes a difference. Rather than just doling out a punishment to someone who's involved in a crime. How does the court, in its capacity, send a message of deterrence. I'd like to think the court has the ability still in this age to send that type of message to a community that's involved in a murder for hire, a solicitation, conspiracy of epic proportions. That's all based upon a mistaken, foolish premise. Court heard the testimony. The court is aware how unnecessary this whole murder for hire, murder sequence was. And we'd like to believe that there's some justice involved, not just with the punishment to the individual who's responsible for these crimes, but for the concept of what can we do as a legal community to prevent this from happening again. The only way that I am aware to send a message of deterrence is through what Ms. Weiss has indicated. The court has to consider strongly the concept of making these sentences consecutive, making these sentences stack upon each other to send a real message to those people who are right now thinking about how do we murder Austin Richardson? How do we murder David Taylor? How do we murder DeAndre Wood? How do we murder Chris Carton? How do we murder Juan Vasquez? Because Mr. Cecil's trial is coming up again in the future. And all of those people's lives are at risk because they came in and testified against Latin counts. Thank you.
In determining the appropriate sentence in this case, the court considered the seriousness of the offense, their history, principle of proportionality, statutory penalty, cost of confinement, report and recommendation of the probation department, as well as what's been said on the record here this morning. The criterion reasons for the sentence are the nature and gravity of the offenses, the discipline appropriate to their commission, deterrence against repetition by you and by others, indications of law, and the protection of society. Mr. Trevino is a 40-year-old man who in this case has been convicted of second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, and gang crimes in connection with those crimes. Mr. Trevino has 11 prior felonies and 5 prior misdemeanors. As been mentioned, numerous of those felonies involved other shootings, although it doesn't appear that others were hurt in those shootings. It does indicate, I think, complete lack of respect or disregard for human life, not just in this instance, but other instances in Mr. Trevino's life. This crime is one that was, it was cold, it was callous, it was calculated. The conviction here is a result of having a discussion while in the Lenawee County Jail and essentially ordering a hit on Mr. Dickerson that was eventually carried out for the purpose of preventing Mr. Dickerson from testifying in a criminal trial. And so we have obviously the physical victim, Mr. Dickerson, who is no longer with us. He was killed and left for dead in a way that I can't imagine the pain that the family and friends of Mr. Dickerson must feel. I don't think any of us could imagine having a loved one put through that. So his family is victims as well, in a way that they likely will never recover from. Society is also a victim in this case. Society is a victim in every case, but particularly in this case, where a person was killed to prevent them from testifying at another trial. And on top of the heinous nature of killing another human being, of committing a murder, of taking a life, doing it for the purpose of undermining everything that this society is built on, undermining the basic rule of law, in my opinion, makes the crime all the more worse. So with respect to the murder conviction, as well as the conspiracy and solicitation convictions, the court has the ability to sentence to life or any term of years. With respect to a life sentence, Mr. Trevino would be eligible for parole after serving a mandatory minimum due to the habitual offender classification of 25 years in this case. I don't believe, given Mr. Trevino's past criminal history and crimes that were committed here, that would be appropriate. I think the record well establishes that Mr. Trevino is a dangerous person who commits violent crimes when he is free. I think that the court's response to that should be to do what it can to make sure that that does not happen again. So I think the more proportional sentence would be term of years. With respect to sentencing a person to a term of years, the court is required by the law to establish a minimum sentence that the defendant has a reasonable opportunity to outlive. And have taken that into consideration in fashioning the whole sentence as well. But I don't think that, again, the de facto minimum of the life sentence is sufficient or proportional in this case, for the reasons that I've stated. It is going to be the sense of the court with respect to counts 1 and 2 that Mr. Trevino served 45 to 85 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. With respect to count 3, 37 years, 6 months to 65 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. And with respect to count 4, $15 years to 320 months with the Michigan Department of Corrections. We'll have credit for 435 days previously served. Must pay $272 state cost, $130 crime victims' rights fee, restitution payable to Tracy Dickerson in the amount of $2,490.40. With respect to the issue of whether those sentences are concurrent or consecutive, those sentences will be concurrent, and the reason for that is that I believe that the sentence on counts 1 and 2 make the issue of consecutive sentencing not a moot point, but I believe the court has accomplished in the sentences for count 1 and 2 what it intends to accomplish, and that consecutive sentencing would meaningfully add to the overall sentence. That would be the sense in court. Mr. Trevino, you do have the right to appeal. Bailiff's going to hand to you 3 copies of a notice of right to appellate review and request for appointment of attorney form. We'll ask you to sign the top copy of the form and return it to us. That just indicates that you received your copies of the form. If you would like to appeal your sentence, you need to fill out the remaining copies of the form and mail those to the address listed in the form within 42 days. Alternatively, if you know now that you want to appeal, you can fill those out before you leave, and we'll take them from you before you go.
Your Honor, what was your sentence on count 4?
15 to the 320 months.
Will you be giving him credit for time served? He
Yes.
wasn't on parole at the time that this offense occurred, but in the meantime was discharged from parole.
I think he's entitled to 435 days, so I'm going to give him 435 days credit.
We agree, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, the record should reflect that you have a copy of the notice of right to appellate review form signed by Mr. Trevino, and I am placing that in the file. I believe that concludes for today, unless Ms. Wise or Mr. Dave, you have anything else.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
So he needs to fill out the rest of it. He's trying to file his appeal, he needs to fill out the file.
Yeah, so let's unpack this. First, let's watch this cockroach walk out. And there he is. It's an empty chair. 40 years is the sentence that he was given for this, and and frankly, I don't feel like it's enough. Now, I get why he didn't give him a life sentence, and that was because he would have been eligible for parole after 25 years. So instead, the judge chose to give him 40 straight years with no opportunity of parole. Now, the DA, which I really like the DA in this case, she was going for the jugular. She was taking no prisoners. They said they want to have the sentences run consecutively, so one after the other. And the judge didn't do that. The judge did 40 years, but to run concurrently, and I don't understand why. Here is a man who was locked up in jail, as the judge said he had violated so much, violating our system by eliminating a witness who is going to testify against him, and that punishment, proper punishment, has to be put down. And it's like, Well, how is 40 years a proper punishment? You had the opportunity, you had the option to have him serve what would have been a life sentence. So the judge does this whole big talk, but in my opinion, he hands down. Look, he's gonna the defendant's gonna be 70 years old by the time he gets out, but he still didn't throw the book at him. I don't understand that. These were the so these were the sentences that he was found guilty on. Count 1, which could serve 45 to 85 years. Count 3, 37.5 to 65 years. And count 4, 15 to 3 to 20 months. And he could have done them consecutively, and he didn't. And and the DA said, well, don't let him get his jail credit. You know, they still went after him. And the judge said, no, he needs his jail credit. So I don't know. It seems a little bit of two-faced to me, if you ask me. Now he's got other charges, and he's, so at least he will be locked up for a very long time. But, what it was is that he was being called up to testify against them. And from jail, this gangster who actually legally changed his name to it's his legal name. You can see it here. Even in his own, under his DOC number, Count TERESO the Almighty Trevino. Yes, you are so almighty. You are so brave. And now you're going to rot in prison. You're going to rot there in a little cell, hanging out with a bunch of men. You're going to be so tough, huh? It's funny that these criminals, these gang members, they think they're so tough and they act so tough. But the second they were caught, his buddies all turned on him, all to testify against him. They had a trial where they're all going against each other. And it's like, and where do you end up? You end up denouncing your gang membership, which is what he did as part of his defense. He said at the time that this was done, he wasn't involved in the gang. You end up testifying against each other. And then you end up locked up where you're going to spend the rest of your life hanging out with a bunch of men in the toilet. Seems like a great life, dude. Now, it won't be the rest of his life. He will get out at 70 years old because he's no, he'll be 80 years old. He's 40 now, and he has a 40-year sentence. So if he survives that long, he's going to come out at 80. And you don't age well in prison. You can say 80 today, you got a lot of life ahead of you, but 80 in prison is a different kind of 80. But it still doesn't answer my question as to why the judge didn't throw the book at him to send a message. And then you hear his mother's testimony, and she is it's sad because she comes out and thanks the DA and everyone involved, which was a beautiful thing to hear, that they did put in all this work. And it was a complicating case. And the other two co-defendants actually had a mistrial, which is interesting. I'll put all the links in the description. And also, don't let me forget to thank Richard for putting all of this together for me. He sent it in one email with all the links. And as I said, it was a softball down the middle. Make it easy for me to put this together to show you guys. 1,606 days since Chris was taken. Not a single day goes by that I don't miss my son. I do not forgive this person. That would be a lie. For a mother to lose her only son in such a senseless way, to have them joke about it on social media, and all for nothing, because he only ended up getting a longer sentence for doing this. I don't know what he was originally locked up for. I think it was, but it wasn't this. It wasn't capital or so senseless. But he won't get out until he's 80. And that's assuming the other charges aren't run consecutively for his other crimes. So with that, I'll let you go. And if you do like these type of hearings, you can check out my main channel, Mandu. We have over 600 parole and commutation hearings. But with that, I'll let you go.